Jaya.
Absolutely. And we have a question from a concerned listener, and he asks, I was chosen in the H1B lottery in March, and my company petitioned for the H1B in April. My H1B was approved by the USCIS using premium processing in April for an October 1st start date. Does this mean that I'm guaranteed to get my visa stamp at the US Consulate Office in Mumbai when I return home for my interview there?
Wow, that's a great question, Vijaya, and I'm so glad that our listeners are keying in to the fact that this is the time of year when we get those questions. I mean, it is, not to steal your thunder, but it is a hot question because everyone is planning their trip home for Diwali.
Yeah,
so they
festival season starts today.
That's right. That's right. And they are thinking about setting up their appointments at the US Consulate Office. And so I think that we have to start with this proposition. And, we always say it when we're on your show. Unfortunately, nothing in the immigration world is guaranteed. So what we do, though, is we try to reduce the possibility of there being problems. That's what we as immigration lawyers try to do. But a lot of people think that just because they get an approval notice in the mail, that means that or electronically, that means that they're guaranteed to be able to go to the consulate and to get that visa stamp in their passport. And unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. They're going to be submitted to additional questions at the U.S. Consulate Office abroad. And the U.S. Consulate officers are going to be looking for information and sometimes documentation, but not usually documentation, about what the individual is coming to do and where they're coming to do it and how they're coming to do it. So, of course, there's really no substitute for preparing properly. And what we do is we describe it as having an elevator pitch. And what you do is you describe quickly to the officer, you articulate clearly what it is you're coming to do and where you're coming to do it, how you're coming to do it, and so on. So there are a couple of situations where individuals get I-94s in the U.S., and that gives them a form of status in the U.S., but it doesn't give them the visa stamp. And I think the best way to describe it is kind of like what we call Immigration 101, which is that there are really two administrative agencies that are overseeing the immigration process. The USCIS, or Department of Homeland Security, which administers this H-1B process, is here in the U.S., and then we have the U.S. Department of State, which acts as a checks and balances, for anyone of our listeners who knows about U.S. Government. It's called checks and balances. So what happens is the USCIS, Department of Homeland Security, grants the status in the U.S. The individual has that status if it's granted in the U.S. If they were to stay in the U.S. on October 1st and a change of status is granted, then they can continue in the U.S. on their H-1B. However, if they ask for what's called consular processing, then what happens is through an internal database called PIMS, the Department of Homeland Security, through the Kentucky Consular Center, sends the information abroad to all the U.S. consulate offices outside the United States, which opens the door potentially to third country processing, which is another story altogether, because third country processing is discretionary at the U.S. consulate offices. But a person could go to the U.S. consulate office then in Mumbai, fill out a DS-160 form, and apply for a visa stamping in their U.S. passport. In their foreign
passport,
right?
A U.S. passport.
Yeah, the U.S. passport, they wouldn't have to go, right? So in their foreign passport, they get this visa stamp, which is on safety paper, and that is their ticket that allows them to re-enter the United States. And then that would be for a 3-year initial grant. And then, of course, we deal with the extension thereafter. But I think the most important thing for our listeners to understand, Vijaya, is that there are two administrative agencies, each having separate jurisdictions over this form of status that this potential foreign worker is going to have. And it's important not just to get the H-1B through the process here in the U.S., but also to adequately prepare yourself for the questions that are going to come at the U.S. Consulate Office abroad.
I see. Wow. You laid it out so well for us and very clear, and that's going to help a lot of people out there listening, and including the one who asked the question. So thank you so much, David. Always appreciate it, and thank you.